Hey guys, tonight we dive into a story that's just weird enough to be real, because it is. Imagine you're standing barefoot on warm, shell-strewn sand. The sky above you is a deep velvet black, lit only by stars that blink like ancient secrets. Around you, a ring of fire torches flickers, casting long shadows of tattooed chiefs who murmur low across a wide circle. Every one of them holds a coconut. Not for drinking. Not for eating. No, tonight, these coconuts will settle something far spicier than thirst. A land dispute? A marriage betrayal? Someone stole someone else's pig? Doesn't matter. Because here, in this part of the Pacific, justice isn't shouted, or written, it's hurled. And you're about to witness just how serious coconut diplomacy can get. You probably won't survive this if your reflexes are bad. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Also, tell me in the comments, where are you watching from, and what time is it right now? Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You crouch at the edge of a moonlit gathering, heartbeats syncing with the rhythm of drums thumping somewhere behind the pandanus grove. In the center, arranged in a wide oval, sit the high chiefs of neighboring clans. Their hair is oiled and tied high, their chins lifted just slightly above the rest, not arrogance, more like tradition flexing its muscle. Between them lies an ancient mat made of woven reeds. This is not just seating. It's stage, courtroom, arena, and altar. At one end, an elder clears his throat and steps forward. The island's Tulafel, the talking chief, his job is to speak for the high chiefs without them having to dirty their dignity with shouting. You watch as he moves, his voice not loud but shaped to cut through the night air like a paddle slicing water. The crowd hushes. You're not sure what the argument is about yet, something involving a cursed breadfruit grove and a suspiciously fertile fishing reef, but that part barely matters. The drama's all on how it's resolved. As the Tulafel speaks, one of the younger warriors leans into you and mutters, "If you ever want to know how a man really feels, hand him a coconut and give him an enemy." And that's when you see it. Each chief is cradling a large, hand-picked coconut, rounded, sand-smoothed, and, in one case, elaborately painted with a red turtle pattern. These aren't snacks. They are declarations. The first dispute of the night begins. The Tulafel finishes recounting the land boundary in question, dated back 5 grandfathers. Then he nods to both men, who stand and walk toward opposite ends of the oval. They grip their coconuts tighter, their bare feet flexing in the sand. One spins his coconut lazily in his palm like a baseball pitcher warming up. The other tightens his jaw. There is no shouting, no judge. Only silence, and the memory of what happens when you throw and miss, and when you throw too well. Historians still argue whether these coconut exchanges were meant as trial, sport, or ritual reenactment of ancient battles. One thing's certain, they were anything but symbolic. The first chief steps forward, squints, and with one breathless grunt, he hurls. The coconut arcs beautifully, end over end, before it crashes not into his opponent, but into the standing post behind him. It thunks hard enough to shake loose a few feathers from the top. The second chief doesn't flinch. He just grins, wipes his hands, and steps into position. You glance around. No one's blinking. Every villager, young, old, even the dogs, are frozen, waiting to see if this ends with a laugh or a feud that lasts 10 years. And in the soft glow of torchlight, one thing becomes clear. Justice, here, travels at roughly 60 kilometers per hour and is made entirely of tree fruit. The Tulafel steps back as the second chief lifts his coconut, cradling it like a newborn, and then with a sudden flick of the wrist, sends it spiraling toward the post. It hits just off-center, chips splintering off the wood, but not toppling it. A murmur rustles through the crowd like wind in a breadfruit grove. The score is even. You lean in, heart pounding faster than you expected. It's not just the throwing that has you glued, it's the stakes. Because here, this isn't just a contest of strength or aim. This is politics. And the men hurling coconuts are royalty. In the islands scattered across Polynesia, Tonga, Samoa, Hawaii, the Marquesas, the social order was layered, precise, and sacred. High chiefs held divine mana, or spiritual power, thought to be inherited directly from the gods. But that didn't mean they didn't argue. Oh, they argued. Over land, fish traps, tattoo lines, priestly permissions, marriage alliances, anything really. And when these disputes escalated, when words soured or when rival clans refused to budge, that's when the coconut circle formed. Not a formal term, but that's what islanders whispered it as. The circle was where dignity could be preserved, but rage could still find a way to fly, quite literally, through the air. Tonight, though, the stakes feel different. You spot an old man with a sea turtle tattoo that wraps around his throat. He's clutching a carved staff and murmuring prayers. It's rare for him to show up unless the outcome could split a village in half, or worse. The Tulafel clears his throat again. You notice the rhythm, a speech, a pair of throws. Then another speech. The rules of the ritual are strict. Each man may throw once, respond once, and throw again if necessary. Never more than 3 total, or else it's seen as inviting chaos. Legends speak of a long-forgotten island where a 4th throw was made, and the island sank beneath the waves that very night. Historians still debate whether this was pure metaphor, a tsunami, or just a very dramatic way to ban overkill. Anyway, tonight nobody's risking a 4th toss. The 3rd round begins. Now the first chief steps forward, his coconut different this time. It's darker, rounder, and, wait, is that coconut oil? He's polished it. Some say a glossy nut flies straighter. Others say it's just for show. Either way, the crowd hums with quiet excitement. He winds up, and this time, he doesn't aim for the post. He aims lower, at a ceremonial mat placed at his opponent's feet. The coconut thuds, rolls, and stops precisely in front of the chief's toes. A challenge? A peace offering? An insult? The second chief's face tightens. According to island custom, where your coconut lands tells more than where it hits. If you aim close, you seek truce. If you throw wide, you're declaring distance, emotional, territorial, or otherwise. If you hit the post behind a man, you're challenging his backing, his ancestors, his supporters. And if you throw at the man, that's basically war. So now everyone waits. The second chief stoops slowly, picks up the offered coconut, and, after a pause so long you hear your own breath, cracks a grin. A real one. Teeth and all. He lifts the nut high, then gently places it on the mat beside him. No throw. Just placement. The message is clear, we're done here. The Tulafel beams, raises his hands, and the entire crowd lets out a whoop that nearly startles a nesting heron from the treetops. Dispute resolved. Honor intact. No blood spilled. A woman behind you claps softly and mutters, "That's how real men fight." Her husband nudges her with a smirk, clearly proud he once missed 3 targets in a row during his coconut days. Historians have long tried to decipher the legal logic of this ritual. Was it sport? Law? Symbolic trial? The truth, as always, is slippery. It was all those things and none. The coconut toss was embedded in a framework of mana, diplomacy, and deeply performative tradition. Even if the actual results didn't change much, the way a chief behaved in that circle could elevate, or destroy, his legacy. You lie back in the sand, brain buzzing, and watch the stars wheel above. Somewhere in this ancient, sacred chaos of coconuts and customs, you're beginning to understand what justice feels like when it isn't typed up on paper or decided by gavel. It's sweaty, risky, and it smells faintly of fermented palm sap. You wake the next morning, well, not wake exactly, more like uncurl from where you accidentally dozed off beneath a palm leaf canopy. The sand's still clinging to your calves, and a half-eaten taro root is lodged under your hip. Around you, the village hums back to life with the sound of scraping coconuts, pounding poi, and someone in the distance cursing at a stubborn fishing net. But all anyone's really talking about is last night. Specifically, did you see Chief Maka's second throw? Oh, he was aiming close. You could tell. That spin was a peace spin. Peace spin? My uncle says it curved left because he's got a weak shoulder. Apparently, the interpretation of coconut tosses is a full-time community sport. But now, the Tulafel's nephew is walking toward you, arms full of fresh nuts. "You're helping today," he says, and doesn't wait for a yes. You're ushered toward the village clearing where coconuts are laid out like contestants in a fruit beauty pageant. Because not all coconuts are created equal. You learn, fast, that the right coconut for a dispute isn't just the first one you pluck. Oh no! There are rules. Dozens. Some of them ancient. Some made up 5 minutes ago by someone's cousin. Still, they matter. First, weight. A proper coconut must fit in one hand but not feel like a feather. Too light, and it's disrespectful, an unserious throw. Too heavy, and it feels aggressive, like you want to break something. Second, color. Pale brown suggests youth, optimism, a wish for peace. Darker coconuts? Those are for more serious grievances. Or late-night drama. Third, and this is where it gets wonderfully strange, is the sound. Chiefs sometimes shake coconuts beside their ear. If it sloshes loudly, they say it's too emotional. If it's silent, it might be harboring secrets. You crack up when someone explains this. But then you shake one, and yeah, it does kind of feel judgmental. Finally, the scent. Yep, they sniff them. Some chiefs rub coconut leaves or ground shell powder on them. One elder whispers to you that coconut spirits prefer the smell of fermented pandanus. You're not sure if he's messing with you. His face says no. His wink says definitely yes. You're given the job of carrying the selected coconuts to the edge of the arena, a mat woven in spirals, meant to represent the interconnectedness of the villages involved. As you place the coconuts down, careful not to scratch or dent them, an elder woman named Kailani pauses beside you. Do not drop one, she warns. Last boy who did that lost his eyebrow. Wait, what? Not on purpose, she assures, and walks off. Historians still argue whether the process of selecting coconuts was meant to carry symbolic meaning, or if it was just part of a ritualized performance to keep tempers cool before things escalated. Some even suggest it was designed to draw attention away from the dispute itself, to turn conflict resolution into something more like ceremony. A coconut pageant instead of a knife fight. And it works. By the time the chiefs arrive later that afternoon, garlanded, oiled, and draped in their finest mats, the coconuts are already waiting, glinting like trophies under the tropical sun. Their surfaces have been rubbed with ash and polished with coconut oil to shine. You recognize one from the pile you carried earlier, and now it's in the hand of a very serious-looking man with shoulders like bread ovens. That night's dispute? A boundary stone between gardens. But everyone knows it's really about the argument that happened last season when someone accused someone's pig of being unreasonably clever. Long story. The Tulafel recites the history, the audience leans forward, and once again, coconuts prepare to fly. But before they do, something changes. One of the chiefs begins to chant, low, rhythmic, with his eyes closed. Then the other joins in. Suddenly the throwing circle isn't just a courtroom, it's a choir. You realize then that coconut justice isn't always about winning. Sometimes, it's just about being heard. Tonight's sky is a sheet of obsidian, brushed with salt spray and pierced by constellations you don't recognize but somehow trust. The torch flames flicker like they know something's about to happen, and the audience around the coconut arena has grown twice as large as yesterday. Word's gotten out. There's a big one brewing. A village from across the lagoon has sent representatives, a whole canoe-load of them, actually, to protest the way last year's breadfruit harvest was divided. Which sounds dull at first, until you realize the fruit grove in question sits squarely on the border of two ancestral fishing zones, and oh yeah, a canoe from the eastern bay was mysteriously borrowed around the same time. Suspicious? Maybe. Personal? Definitely. As the two chiefs circle the arena, bare feet crunching shell dust, you sense it. This isn't going to be a gentle throw-angrin session. This one has momentum. And then, without waiting for the Tulafil's full recitation, the first coconut is launched. It whistles through the air like it knows it has a destiny. It misses the post by a palm's width and explodes against the hard-packed sand. The crowd gasps. Not because it missed, but because it shouldn't have been thrown yet. The Tulafil stiffens. The ritual has a rhythm, and that throw? That broke it. You glance around. Nobody breathes. A second too long passes. Then the second chief calmly picks up his coconut, runs his thumb along the carved groove in its side, was that a glyph? And hurls it in return. But not at the post. Not even at the mat. It soars just to the left of the first man and hits the rim of his seat. You hear the impact. You hear the snap. The first chief stumbles back, not hurt, just stunned. And now, suddenly, everything's different. Because here's the thing, in traditional coconut justice, the aim is symbolic. Never direct at the man. Only dishonored chiefs stoop to that. And yet tonight, a line has been crossed. Some elders mutter into their palms. A pair of drummers stop playing. A child starts crying and is quickly whisked away by her auntie. You hear the whispered phrase, "Ue soli alivie tapu." The sacred space has been broken. Historians still argue whether these infractions led to actual warfare or if they were simply absorbed into the next round of coconut diplomacy. Some records claim entire villages relocated over an ill-timed toss. Others say that's a myth, more coconut lore than coconut law. But you're not thinking like a historian right now. You're watching as the Tulafel steps between the men, raising both hands high. His expression is unreadable. Not angry, not scared, just disappointed. And somehow, that's worse. Then something unexpected happens. He walks over to the shattered coconut shell and kneels. Slowly, deliberately, he scoops up half of it and holds it out, not to the thrower, but to the crowd. This, he says, voice graveled with time, is what happens when pride outruns patience. And just like that, the wind changes. The crowd shifts. The tension ebbs. The chief who threw too soon lowers his head. Not in shame exactly, but in recognition. This isn't defeat. This is the cost of forgetting the rhythm. Later, the Tulafel explains to you that the act of throwing is only half the ritual. The other half is waiting to throw. Sometimes, he says, what you don't throw speaks louder. You nod. You're learning. The coconut court resumes, but this time with more care. The rest of the night passes without another misstep. There's even laughter by the end, especially when one chief's throw misses so wildly it knocks over a basket of yams. You stay until the last torch dims and someone tosses the remains of a coconut into the fire. It pops like punctuation. And as you drift back to your palm frond hut, you think, maybe the real justice wasn't in the throw. It was in the pause before it. The next morning, the village is buzzing, not in anger, but in gossip mode, which honestly might be more dangerous. Someone claims they saw a coconut fly sideways like a ghost crab on stilts, while another insists the throwing chief last night was cursed by an eel priest 3 years ago. You sip from a carved shell of coconut water and try to keep a straight face. Apparently, everything in this village can be explained by either eel curses or too much kava. Still, nobody's laughing about what comes next. You're invited to observe the preparations for another round of dispute resolution, but this time, it's not about land or fruit or even borrow canoes. It's something trickier, honor. Honor disputes are harder to settle because they aren't about things, they're about reputation. And in Polynesian cultures, especially among chiefs, reputation is everything. It's inherited, protected, and passed on like a sacred necklace made of shark teeth and whispers. Today's disagreement? A chief accused another of failing to show up for a ceremonial turtle feast. Not just any feast, the feast marking the end of the hurricane season. Rumor has it he skipped it to attend a rival village's dance. The other chief took it as a snub. And here you are now, sitting in the outer ring of a new coconut court, watching two grown men in woven belts of banana fiber prepare to lob nuts at each other's egos. But here's the twist. This ritual won't target posts or mats. No. Today's dispute will be resolved with pohai, an old form where the goal is to throw close, not far. A test of restraint, not rage. The chief who lands his coconut nearest to the other without touching him is seen as clever, respectful, and controlled. But one slip, one actual hit, and you've just insulted your opponent's ancestors, his entire clan, and probably his pet pig. The first chief steps forward, coconut tucked under his arm like a rugby ball. He paces, breathes, and releases. The nut arcs low and lands with a soft thump, maybe a foot away from the other man's knee. Close. The crowd hums with quiet approval. A baby claps. A dog sneezes. Now it's the second chief's turn. He twirls his coconut once, grins sideways, and steps lightly. He throws. The coconut skids. It rolls. And it nudges, just nudges, the other chief's toe. The crowd gasps like someone's shouted tsunami. The Tulafel doesn't move. Not at first. He's letting the moment hang like sea mist. Then he walks slowly toward the coconut, crouches, picks it up, and, this part's new to you, sniffs it. You stifle a laugh. Apparently, scent matters here too. Maybe he's checking for curse residue. Finally, the Tulafel nods. The coconut did not strike. It kissed. Laughter erupts. Even the offended chief chuckles. They both step forward, shake hands, and perform a brief nose-to-nose greeting, Bahoni. The crowd cheers. Dispute settled. Historians still argue whether these rituals had binding legal authority or were just symbolic social bombs. But the outcome feels real. The tension's gone. The village hums lighter now. Later, you're told a curious fact. Coconuts used in honor disputes are sometimes kept as heirlooms. Dried, carved, even painted, then hung in homes as a reminder that wisdom isn't in the strength of your throw, but in the precision of your paws. You pass one such coconut that evening, painted with blue swirls and a cracked rim, and wonder what story it holds. A saved friendship? A narrowly avoided war? Or just a really good joke someone threw 5 feet to the left? One thing's for sure, on these islands, justice isn't about slamming your fist down. It's about knowing how close is just close enough. The sun's setting again, casting molten orange ribbons across the water, and tonight's coconut court has a different tension. There's chatter about what happened years ago, that night when a single toss led to the Great Split. You try to press for details, but the locals just shake their heads and mumble, "Ask an old man," which is code for "it's complicated." Eventually, you find him, Old Man Kalama, sitting near a cracked canoe and shelling sea urchins with one good eye and zero patience. After some light flattery and a shared coconut biscuit, he begins. "There were 2 chiefs," he says, "both born on the same day, same moon, same storm. Raised like brothers, until they weren't. Apparently, one accused the other of moving a sacred stone marker on their shared island, on purpose. That stone marked the dividing line between their garden lands. One shift, just half a handspan, and suddenly taro plants became political. They met on the beach, in silence," Kalama says, voice dropping low. "No tilafale. No drums. Just them. Each with a coconut. You imagine it, 2 men standing barefoot on volcanic rock, torches crackling in the wind, neither blinking. The story goes that the first coconut hit so hard, it split on impact, right against the post behind the accused. The sound echoed through the bay like a conch blown for war. But the second chief didn't throw. He simply left. Took his canoe, his wives, his pigs, his yams, and half his people. Rode around the other side of the island and built a wall, yes, a literal wall, of upright palm trunks. The village split in 2. Markets, ceremonies, marriages, all had to be renegotiated. Even funerals became awkward. Historians still debate whether this wall was a symbolic barrier or an actual structure. Some claim remnants of the trunks were found under later layers of sand and coral. Others argue it was a metaphor invented to dramatize a rift that was already happening. But ask any elder on this island, and they'll point to the northern path and say, that's where the line was drawn. Back in the present, the story hangs heavy. Tonight's dispute isn't as dire, but the lesson lingers. You head toward the arena where a new coconut circle is forming. 2 young chiefs in training are being mentored through their first official toss. This isn't a real conflict, more like a ceremonial simulation. Still, the rules are followed to the letter. The Tulafel guides them, calling out steps like a dance instructor at a wedding: step, lift, breathe, release. The coconuts fly clean. Land wide. No hits. Applause follows. One old woman mutters, "Better wide than war." Afterward, the chiefs bow not to each other, but to the circle itself. You're told this is a show of respect to the space, that once you've thrown within it, you're part of its memory. The mat remembers. The posts remember. The coconut husks remember. Later that evening, you walk to the northern shore alone. No wall stands there now, just waves kissing stones and a sleepy moon. But you can still feel it. Some divisions outlive their cause. Others fade, like footprints in sand. And sometimes, a well-aimed coconut is the only thing standing between legacy and fracture. The night feels warmer than usual, like the air itself is leaning in to listen. You're sitting cross-legged just outside the circle, your seat marked by a card shell laid there hours ago by a child who decided you were probably not cursed. A vote of confidence, apparently. Tonight's dispute? It's strange. Not angry. More procedural. 2 chiefs are arguing over a turtle-shaped rock. Not a real turtle, but a large, naturally sculpted stone that everyone agrees resembles a turtle and sits directly in the path between 2 villages. Some believe it brings luck to travelers. Others say it marks where a legendary ancestor once tripped and accidentally created a coconut tree by landing face first into the soil. You think they're kidding. They are not. So the issue is, does the turtle rock belong to the northern village who hosts it, or the southern one, who believes their ancestor became it? You're starting to understand that ownership here isn't just about possession. It's about meaning, memory, story. and the stakes rise when the Tulafel announces the court will invoke the 3-throw rule. This is the sacred rhythm. Throw. Response. Throw again. After that, all tossing must stop, because a 4th toss is an invitation. Not to continue, but to escalate. Tradition holds that tossing a 4th time invites the gods into the circle, and that their judgment comes in forms less predictable than coconuts. You watch with heightened attention. The first chief, slight, weathered, but sharp-eyed, steps forward. His coconut is laced with dyed synnic cord, like a gift. He throws low. It skips once. Lands gently near a neutral stone between the villages. Message received, compromise. The second chief, a broad-shouldered woman with calloused hands and a tattooed chin, smiles. She walks, lifts, and lobs, not at the stone, but higher, letting her coconut land in a small tree's roots. It rolls gently, stopping precisely in line with the setting sun. There's a murmur of approval. Her message? The rock belongs to everyone, as long as they're walking the right direction. Now, the 3rd throw. The first chief walks silently, coconut now painted with swirling patterns. You recognize one from earlier. It's the symbol 4 pathway or maybe wandering chicken depending on the angle. He throws. The coconut arcs gracefully, spins 3 times, and lands exactly between the other 2. Silence. Then applause. Dispute resolved, without insult, without injury, and without summoning lightning bolts. Historians still argue over the origin of the 3-throw rule. Some say it was invented to mirror celestial movements. 1 toss for earth, 1 for sky, 1 for ocean. Others claim it was just a convenient way to keep hot-headed chiefs from showing off. Either way, the effect is the same. It gives structure to chaos. You glance around. Everyone seems lighter, as though the act of tossing coconuts, done with meaning, has aired out the grievances stuck in their lungs. You notice something else too. A boy beside you is drawing each throw in the sand with his finger. Not just circles, but flight paths. Arcs. The shape of emotion. This isn't a game to him. It's memory work. The same way Polynesian navigators read stars or waves, this child is reading conflict like choreography. Later, one of the elders explains that some coconut disputes were kept in oral histories, passed down like canoe routes or genealogy songs. But others were recorded, not on paper, but on mats, wood carvings, or braided into chants. So somewhere out there, there's probably a lullaby about a turtle rock and a woman who aimed for the roots instead of the heart. And maybe, that's all justice needs. A rhythm, a witness, and a very well-tossed coconut. You wake before dawn to the sound of scraping, soft, rhythmic, like someone gently carving history. Turns out, that's exactly what's happening. Beneath the veranda of the chief's meeting house, 3 figures sit hunched over pandanus mats, hands black with charcoal and soot. They're the Tatusi, scribe historians, and their job is to record last night's dispute in a way that memory alone can't fully hold. They don't use pens. There is no ink. Instead, they rub crushed charcoal over hand-woven mats, darkening tiny knots or strips to indicate key details: who threw, where it landed, what was said, who flinched. It's a mix of Morse code, family gossip, and Polynesian poetry. You inch closer, whispering not to disturb them, and watch as one of the scribes outlines a coconut arc with his pinky dipped in ash. This, he says without looking up, is how we remember without paper. Another woman beside him snorts. Paper forgets faster anyway. It's not just the throwing that matters, you're realizing. It's the witnessing. Every coconut court session is woven, literally, into the fabric of the community. The mats become legal records, heirlooms, sometimes even burial shrouds. You touch one corner and feel the faint rise of a burn mark. A coconut struck the chief's chair, she explains. We saved the mark. Historians love to debate how accurate these mats are. Could a soot stain not truly capture who threw what, when, and with how much attitude? Some say yes. Others argue that these recordings were more interpretive than archival, closer to theater than transcript. But one thing's for sure, everyone here believes in them. And that belief shapes everything. Later, the mats are folded ceremonially and placed in a bamboo frame inside the longhouse. Before they're put away, the Tulafel reads the record aloud, not shouting, just murmuring like a bedtime story to the ancestors. You hear phrases like the coconut kissed the earth without offense and the path was shared, not claimed. Poetry, law, memoir, all rolled into one. That night, the dispute involves a spilled offering bowl at the altar. Seems simple, but it gets complicated fast when one chief accuses another of intentional disrespect. Apparently, placing your bowl slightly to the left suggests you believe your ancestors rank higher than your neighbors. Left placement is for the bold, they say. Center is for harmony. Right means humility. You try to follow. You fail. It's like seating charts with ancient ghosts. The coconuts are chosen. The throws begin. This time, someone misses so badly it rolls into the feet of a sleeping dog, who then barks once and promptly returns to snoring. The entire arena laughs, and even the arguing chiefs crack reluctant smiles. But the moment isn't wasted, because when the final coconut lands exactly on a folded banana leaf placed by the altar, the Tulafel rises, holds both hands to the stars, and declares the matter resolved. Respect, he says, is not in the bowl, but in the hand that places it. You scribble that one down. It's too good. Later, back at your hut, a young girl named Naya visits and hands you a tiny drawing, a circle, 2 dots, and a squiggle in between. It's you, she says, watching coconuts fly. You're flattered and slightly unnerved. But as she skips away, you look again, and realize the squiggle isn't just a line. It's a path. And in this world, every throw, every mark, every charcoal-smudged mat, is part of that path. You just have to be still long enough to trace it. The wind changes that evening, not with a storm, but with mood. Something in the air feels off before the coconut circle even begins. People talk quieter, the drums beat slower, and the children, normally buzzing around like mosquitoes with too much pineapple juice, are nowhere to be seen. You ask a man tightening a pomfron torch what's going on. He just says, it's the wrong chief. You don't even know what that means yet, but your stomach already understands it's not good. Turns out, a new chief from the outer reef village is visiting. Young, strong, trained in navigation and song, but also left-handed. Normally, nobody cares. But in the coconut circle, tradition matters. Tossing from the left side, or worse, with your left hand, is considered bad form. Not cursed exactly, but suspicious. They say left-handed throws curve wrong. They say they're harder to read. They say the gods prefer right-hand justice. You suspect it's less about the hand and more about the fact that this chief has a reputation for surprises. Still, the Tulafel welcomes him formally, announces the grievance, a minor territorial overlap between reef fishing zones, and invites both sides to select their coconuts. The visiting chief? He brings his own. Sleek, dark, and wrapped in red fiber. The crowd notices. Red is the color of high mana, but also blood. It's bold, arrogant, maybe. You shift in your seat. The toss begins. His opponent throws first, a beautiful arc that lands square on a soft woven mat, unthreatening, textbook perfect. Then it's the lefty's turn. He steps forward, grips the coconut like he's about to serve in a championship volleyball match, and hurls. It's fast. Too fast. It veers. It hits. Not the post. Not the mat. It strikes the leg of the opposing chief's chair with a sharp crack, then spins off and rolls to a stop in front of the Tulafel himself. Gasps. Everywhere. You even see one woman physically hide behind a pig. The Tulafel doesn't move. Not at first. Then, slowly, he stands and picks up the rogue coconut. Turns it in his hands. Sniffs it. Of course. He walks to the middle of the circle and announces, a line has been crossed, whether by hand or heart. You freeze. The next moment will decide everything. Then, relief. The opposing chief stands, walks to the visitor, and offers his own coconut back. Not by throw. Not by word. Just a quiet roll across the sand. The message is clear, we're done here. You get one mistake. The visitor bows slightly, only slightly. But it's enough. Tension ebbs. The audience releases a breath you didn't realize they were holding. Historians still debate whether this incident, known locally as the left-hand throw, caused deeper political changes. Some say it led to years of icy relations between reef communities. Others argue it marked the beginning of more inclusive reforms, because after that day, left-handed chiefs were no longer quietly discouraged from participating. One thing's certain, the coconut circle survived, which is more than anyone expected when the throw first landed. Later, under a lantern of woven shells, you hear people retelling the story already. Some claim the chair cracked. Others say it was just scratched. A child insists the coconut had a face carved into it and was smiling. You learn something crucial that night. In the coconut court, the facts are less important than the feelings. A well-timed roll can defuse a crisis. An ill-angled throw can haunt a reputation for decades. And somewhere between truth and tradition lies the rhythm that keeps these islands in balance. Before you sleep, someone places a small stone outside your hut. Not a warning. A welcome. You're part of the story now. The sky tonight is silvered over with thin clouds, enough to soften the moonlight, but not enough to keep the stars from whispering down. A gentle breeze carries the scent of roasted breadfruit and crushed hibiscus. But what catches your attention most isn't the scent, or the starlight, or even the drums. It's her. Standing beneath the old banyan tree, cloaked in a shawl of shells and feathers, is the chieftain's daughter, Lonnie. Sharp-eyed, poised, observing. And the two chiefs pacing the edge of the coconut arena tonight? Yeah. They're both very clearly not just arguing over a fishing net. You hear snippets, "It was mine first." You only said that after she smiled at you. "I had the net 2 moons before your awkward song at the solstice feast." Yep. This is not about a net. This is about Lonnie. She, to her credit, leans calmly against the banyan's roots, sipping something cold and entirely unbothered. You're pretty sure she knows exactly what's happening. And she seems just amused enough to let it. The Tulafil, meanwhile, is trying to steer the proceedings toward dignity. Tonight's issue concerns a torn net and disputed lagoon rights, he announces. Sure it does. The coconuts are chosen, both smooth, both similar in size and shape. It's subtle, but telling. Neither chief wants to escalate. They're posturing, not declaring war. Yet, the first throw is a gentle lob, aimed not at a post, but at a central shell marker. It lands with a satisfying thud, no drama. The second toss curves wide, very wide, and rolls all the way to Lonnie's feet. Now that's bold. The crowd murmurs. Someone audibly gasps. The Tulafel raises an eyebrow. Lonnie? She smirks, picks up the coconut, walks across the circle, and hands it, not back to the thrower, but to the other chief. Ouch! That's not just a choice, that's a verdict. And in a culture where every action is coated with ancestral weight, it might as well have been chiseled in coral. The second chief laughs, but the kind of laugh you give when your pride's been kneecapped in public. Still, he recovers well, steps forward, bows deeply to both Lonnie and his opponent, and raises his hands in surrender. No need to throw again, he says. The net was poorly tied, and so was I. The crowd erupts in delighted applause. You hear someone whisper, that boy's gonna make a fine diplomat. Historians still wrestle with how much romantic rivalry played into traditional justice systems. Most formal anthropological texts skirt around it, preferring to frame disputes as economic or spiritual. But oral histories? Oh, they tell a different story. There are chants, songs, even entire dances centered on love triangles and misfired coconuts. Back under the banyan, Lonnie resumes her sipping. Someone nudges you. That's not the first coconut she's caught, they say. Probably won't be the last. You ask whether she gets to choose a husband like this every season. The woman shrugs. Sometimes. Other times, she just leaves both of them behind and starts her own canoe-building guild. Fair enough. As the crowd disperses and laughter drifts into the night air, you feel something deeper beneath the surface. The coconut court isn't just a tool for law or leadership. It's theater. It's storytelling. It's community therapy wrapped in husk and thrown with flair. Tonight, no one lost a tooth, but at least one ego got gently roasted like a pig at festival. And everyone walked away knowing exactly where they stood. By now, your ears perk up not at the sound of drums or chants, but at the silence that comes before. That sacred hush when the coconut court prepares to begin. You've learned to read it like an omen. And tonight, the silence hums louder than any storm. Word spread all afternoon, the elders are bringing out the shell. No ordinary conch, this. It's long, spiraled, yellowed by age and legend alike. Said to whisper truths. Said to curse liars. Said to once scream so loudly it cracked a chief's canoe into 3 floating thrones. That part's probably embellished. Or maybe not. You arrive early, settle close to the outer ring, and notice how even the children are sitting still. That never happens. Tonight's case is sticky. 2 chiefs, cousins, no less, accuse each other of mismanaging a sacred land cleansing ceremony. The issue? One claims the other used the wrong prayer. In most legal systems, that might sound petty. But here? If the wrong invocation was spoken, the ancestors might have been offended. And offended ancestors tend to reply with landslides, sick taro, or, in one famous case, a sea turtle that wouldn't stop following people home. So yeah, it matters. Neither chief is budging. The Tulafil recites both accounts in his low, melodic cadence. And then, from a basket woven with dyed vines, he produces the conch. You feel the entire arena lean forward as if gravity itself just changed sides. Each chief steps up, palms raised, and takes turns holding the shell. It's not just about possession. It's a test. The belief is this: if the conch sings, a sharp whistle or hum, while you hold it, you're lying. If it stays silent, you're clear. Now, whether this sound is a result of humidity, finger pressure, breath, or supernatural judgment is a hot debate. Historians love to theorize. One camp claims it's all stagecraft. Another argues it's based on secret shell carving techniques lost to time. Yet others believe the shell has been subtly rigged with internal sea salt to react to heat. The villagers? They don't care. To them, the shell knows. The first chief lifts it gently, holds it with practiced reverence. Silence. The second chief steps forward, grips the shell, and suddenly, a faint shriek pierces the quiet. High-pitched. Short. But definitely there. The audience gasps. A coconut vendor drops his tray. A dog whines and runs. The chief's face turns to stone. But the message is clear. The Tulafel doesn't accuse. He doesn't need to. He simply lowers his gaze and nods once. And the dispute? Resolved. No throws. No bruises. Just the weight of an old shell and the silence that followed. Later, you ask someone how the shell really works. They shrug. Maybe it doesn't. Maybe we just believe in the pause that follows it. You can't argue with that. That evening, you walk along the water and see the losing chief by himself, drawing lines in the sand with a stick. Not brooding, just thinking. He looks up, sees you, smiles faintly. Funny thing, he says, I did say the wrong prayer. But not to offend. I just forgot the words. You wait, unsure. He chuckles, tosses a coconut into the surf. Still, maybe the shell wasn't wrong after all. In this world, justice isn't always about guilt or innocence. Sometimes, it's about facing the moment when truth rises, even if it arrives wrapped in spiral bone and blown by fate. Tonight, you feel the pull of something different. The torches are closer to the shore, the drums deeper, the crowd smaller, but more intense. You spot war canoes pulled up along the beach, carved with shark tooth patterns and lashed with double outriggers. They bob gently in the tide, as if even the ocean's holding its breath. You follow the glow to find the chiefs not circling them out on land, but stepping into their canoes. The Tulafel announces the setting with solemn pride. Tonight's dispute shall be judged by sea. This is Va Toginyo, Coconut Canoe Combat, a rare version of the ritual, reserved for times when land disputes literally spill over into water boundaries. And unlike the inland coconut courts, these battles are wet, wobbly, and wildly unpredictable. Each chief climbs into a vaca, a long, narrow boat barely wide enough for a person and their coconut supply. You notice the coconuts have been oiled and scored with tiny notches to improve grip. Some are painted with sea salt, others wrapped in twisted banana cord. One helper whispers to you, on land, you can aim. At sea, you pray. The canoes push off. 10 strokes. 20. Then silence. The two chiefs face each other, paddles set aside. The Tulafel remains on shore but raises a conch horn, blows once, and the first coconut is thrown. It arcs across the moonlit sky, dips, and splashes short. The chief sways, regains balance, and grins. Return throw. This one lands with a thunk against the bow, not enough to damage, but enough to make everyone cheer. The game is on. For 30 minutes, you watch coconuts sail, skip, spin, and plop across the water. The rules are the same, 3 throws each, max. But the environment makes everything harder. A good hit is celebrated like a grand slam. A clean miss is met with knowing laughter. But here's the twist. During the final throw, the tide shifts. A small wave rises and catches both canoes mid-throw, spinning them gently. The last coconut flies, not at the canoe, but at the shore, where it accidentally lands at the feet of the Tolofale. The crowd gasps. That's a sacred fowl. And just like that, the tone changes. The Tolofale picks up the wet coconut, raises it high, and declares, "The sea has taken this dispute. We do not chase what the ocean returns." Which, roughly translated, means, let it go. Both chiefs bow in their swaying canoes. The dispute is ruled unresolved, not because someone won or lost, but because the sea interrupted. And in Polynesian cosmology, when nature speaks, you listen. Historians still argue whether these sea sessions had actual legal standing or were symbolic displays of humility before the elements. A few journals even claim these events were secretly favored by younger chiefs looking for a way to settle issues without true consequences. But nobody denies their cultural weight. You help the crew haul the canoes back to shore. One of the chiefs pats your back, laughing. That last coconut had a mind of its own. Must have been from the windy side of the island. You nod, wet from sea spray, sand in your hair, and an odd feeling in your chest. Because even though nobody won, something settled anyway. The chiefs walk up the beach side by side. A coconut floats gently behind them in the shallows, bobbing, unsmashed. Justice, like tides, isn't always about force. Sometimes it's about knowing when the ocean says, enough. You're still drying out from the sea trial when someone mentions tonight's coconut court might not happen. The gods are watching, they whisper. You think it's just another poetic metaphor until you look up. The sky is split wide with lightning, streaking silently across a canvas of thick, unmoving clouds. No thunder. No rain. Just the occasional flicker, like flashbulbs from invisible cameras snapping pictures of history before it happens. The elders have gathered at the edge of the circle, heads bowed. A mat is laid, but no one sits. No coconuts are placed. Something's different. And then you notice, nobody is speaking. Not even the Tolofale. Eventually, one of the senior villagers leans over and murmurs, "Some nights, the circle isn't ours." You learn this is one of those rare occasions when the coconut court pauses entirely, not for weather, not for funerals, but because of omens. Unnatural lightning, fish washing ashore, an owl perching backward, even a coconut tree leaning the wrong direction. You chuckle at that last one, but the glare you get wipes the smile off your face fast. It's not superstition. It's protocol. When signs appear, you don't tempt the gods with throwings, shoutings, or spilled egos. But tonight's dispute was already announced, two cousins arguing over canoe inheritance. Backed by multiple families, this wasn't a small spat. Skipping it could spark gossip, feuds, fractures. And so, the chiefs appear. They bow low. Each steps forward. But instead of picking up coconuts, they kneel before the fire, place their hands on the mat, and remain perfectly still. A storm rumbles on the horizon, not close, but close enough. The Tolofale steps forward at last. His voice is low, nearly swallowed by the wind. "No throws tonight," he says. "Tonight, we wait." And that's when it happens. A bolt of lightning slices the sky clean in two, and a sudden gust of wind flips one of the empty mats over completely. The crowd gasps. The Tolofale doesn't flinch. He turns to both chiefs. "Your answer has arrived." They both nod, solemn. The coconut circle is quietly disassembled, the fire buried with sand. The dispute? Postponed. Not erased, but deferred. Because when the sky speaks, even warriors listen. Historians have always struggled to categorize nights like these. Some call them symbolic non-decisions, others label them divine interventions. A few colonial accounts mock the practice, suggesting it's an excuse to avoid conflict. But from where you're sitting, wrapped in a woven shawl, heart thudding from that lightning bolt that didn't quite strike the fire, it doesn't feel like avoidance. It feels like reverence. You walk back to your hut in near silence, save for the wind rustling through coconut palms like gossip you're not quite allowed to hear. Before you reach your mat, someone taps your shoulder. A boy, barefoot, holding a coconut. He places it gently in your hands and says, "For the storm that didn't come," then disappears into the dark. You hold it close, unsure what it means, but absolutely certain it means something. Because on these islands, justice isn't just about action. Sometimes, it's about knowing when not to throw. The morning after the lightning, everything feels rinsed, sky, sand, even the gossip. There's a new scent in the air, too, roasted yams and wood smoke. which can only mean one thing. It's feast day. You stumble out of your hut to see the entire village transformed. The coconut court has been replaced by tables stacked with woven platters. Steam rises from fire pits, children dart between rows of palm decorations, and someone's already broken into a ceremonial dance barefoot, arms flailing with reckless joy. And there they are, the chiefs. Not in ceremonial garb this time, but in simple draped cloths and flower garlands, hair loosened, spirits unguarded. Laughing, joking, sharing bowls of taro stew like they hadn't nearly escalated ancestral-level feuds just days ago. That's how it works here. After the last coconut has flown, no matter the outcome, resolution, pause, or divine interruption, there is always the feast. A moment of return, of reweaving the fabric frayed by conflict. And make no mistake, this is no humble potluck. This is the Great Reconciliation Feast, and it matters every bit as much as the tosses that preceded it. You find yourself pulled in, offered plate after plate of things you can't pronounce but absolutely want seconds of. Roasted breadfruit filled with smoky crab, fish wrapped in banana leaves, and of course, coconut everything. Shaved, baked, boiled, fermented, and even whipped into a surprising dessert that tastes like a coconut flirted with a cloud. At the center of it all is the reconciliation dance. It starts with the chiefs. They rise, solemn at first, and begin a slow, rhythmic step around the old tossing mat, now woven with flowers instead of lines. Every 3 steps, they stop, bow slightly, and toss a small white shell over their shoulders. The crowd mirrors them. Step, bow, shell. You ask what it means. Every shell is a grudge, says an elder. We throw it so we don't carry it. You blink, then look around. Hundreds of shells, scattered like forgiveness across the sand. And then, just when things start to settle, one of the younger chiefs picks up a coconut, pretends to aim, and suddenly everyone's roaring with laughter. Even the Tulafel wheezes, hands on his knees, as someone yells, "Not again, Kenny! You couldn't even hit the mat last time." Kenny bows deeply, makes a show of missing a nearby tree, and everyone claps. It's a joke, but a powerful one. Because it says, we remember, but we don't relive. Historians often struggle with this part of the process. Western frameworks tend to end with verdicts, guilty, innocent, resolved. But here, in this world of coconuts and shells, the ending isn't finality. It's feasting. It's reconnection. It's knowing that even when the throw stings, the meal afterward heals. As the sun sets, torches are lit, drums rise again, not for disputes, but for joy. Elders chant, children sing, and somewhere near the banyan tree, Lonnie is definitely being proposed to by someone again. You don't even ask. You sit back, belly full, heart lighter than it's been in days, and watch as the chiefs raise their final cups of kava together. No weapons, no coconuts, just the clink of calabash bowls and a shared smile. No blood. No bruises. Just bruised egos bandaged by food and firelight. And tomorrow? The coconut circle will be rebuilt. Because disputes never vanish. But here, they're tossed, not buried. And always, always, followed by a meal worth remembering. You wake up with a kava headache and the faint memory of trying to outdance a chief. You didn't win. But the drums are already calling again, this time, with a thud that's half ceremony, half curiosity. Today, a group of visitors has arrived, Europeans, judging by the odd clothing and the way they squint at coconuts like they're about to explode. They're not armed, but they are scribbling furiously in small notebooks, pointing at the circle and asking far too many questions all at once. You're not the only one who notices. The villagers do that thing where they pretend not to care while watching everything. The Tulafel greets the newcomers with a smile that's polite, but tight. He gestures to the mat and says something softly in his native tongue. You catch the tone, watch. But don't interrupt. Tonight's session has been planned to show the custom rather than use it. The dispute is staged, 2 friendly chiefs reenacting a land boundary issue that had been settled seasons ago. But the coconuts are real. The throws are precise. The tradition, even when displayed, is not diminished. The visitors gasp why coconut lands with a perfect spin beside a sacred post. One leans to another and whispers, it's like a tribal sport meets courtroom drama. Another asks, is this a game or a legal act? You don't say anything. But your smirk says plenty. Because here's what they don't get, it is a game. And a law. And a performance. And a spiritual rite. It doesn't fit into their categories because it wasn't made for them. Still, they try. One even sketches the throwing pattern with arrows and labels. Projectile resolution? Another asks if the coconut is meant to symbolize a verdict. A third politely wonders whether any of this could be modernized with signage and safety gear. Someone coughs behind them. Loudly. The Tulafel calls for silence. One of the reenacting chiefs tosses the final coconut, and instead of letting it fall, the other catches it midair, twists, bows, and hands it back. The audience applauds. The locals cheer. The visitors scribble faster. Historians, decades later, would cite events like these as the first recorded observations of ritualized dispute resolution through object-based performance. But the villagers? They just called it Tuesday. Later that evening, as lanterns sway in the sea breeze, one of the visitors approaches the Tulafel with cautious reverence. He holds out a small notebook and a pen. "Would you sign your name for the record?" he asks. The Tulafel stares at the pen, then at the coconut in his own hand. Then he smiles, lifts the coconut, and rolls it gently across the sand to the man's feet. The visitor pauses, then nods, placing the pen back in his coat. He gets it. A little. You sit nearby, nursing a cup of tangy tamarind juice, and watch as traditions bend just slightly, not to break, but to be seen. And the coconut? It's picked up by a village child, cradled like a gift, and carried off into the night. Because here, history isn't something you sign. It's something you toss, and hope the next hand catches it with care. By the time the next canoe docks, something has changed. There's no drumming, no coconut circle, no joking about left-handed chiefs or slippery mats. Just silence. Out steps a man in stiff black clothing, collar tight as his expression. Behind him, books, scrolls, and a cross etched into every visible item short of his forehead. A missionary. The villagers gather, cautious but respectful. They've seen this before. He speaks with gentleness and authority, thanking the people for their hospitality, praising their spirit of community, and then, ever so softly, begins to question, not the coconut ritual itself, but its morality. The gods invoked, the superstitious beliefs, the notion of settling disputes without scripture. He doesn't yell. He doesn't demand. But with every soft word, a seed is planted. And it begins. Within weeks, a few families start attending prayer circles instead of coconut court. Children are taught to sit still and listen, not to chant and throw. The Tulafel still presides, but now with fewer attendees, more folded arms, and occasional frowns from converted elders. One morning, you hear that the throwing mats have been taken down. Stored, not burned, but replaced with benches. The sacred posts? Moved aside. In their place stands a pulpit, carved from the same wood once used to carry coconuts to court. You ask the Tulafel how he feels. He pauses long, then shrugs. Justice comes in many shapes, he says. Sometimes it's round. Sometimes it's written. Still, he carries a coconut in his hand. Not to throw. Just to hold. Historians would later frame this as the transition period, when indigenous rituals across Polynesia gave way to imported legal frameworks. Some call it the death of oral law. Others, a necessary evolution. But not everything disappears. One evening, long after the new church bell has begun to toll daily, you see two boys arguing over a broken paddle. They shout, they stomp, and finally, one picks up a coconut. The other doesn't flinch. Instead, he draws a line in the sand. The first boy stops. Then carefully, very carefully, rolls the coconut along that line. The second boy picks it up. They nod. And just like that, it's over. You smile. Because even if the chords vanish, and the drums fall silent, and the missionaries write everything down in ledgers that smell like damp paper and finality, the rhythm remains. The stories remain. And somewhere in a corner of the village, a mat is still rolled tight, waiting. One day, you think, it might unfurl again. And if not, then at least someone, somewhere, will teach their grandchildren how to aim just short of anger. You blink, and the years seem to roll by like tide over reef, quiet, relentless, reshaping everything in slow ripples. The coconut circle, once bustling with flame and voice, now lives mostly in memory. But memory has a strange way of slipping back into the spotlight when no one's watching. It begins during the Festival of First Fruit, a modern event held every season to celebrate the harvest, community unity, and, Curiously, local sports. There's dancing, yes. Singing, of course. But this year, someone sneaks an old tradition onto the schedule. Demonstration match, coconut tossing, ancestral style. You expect a half-hearted reenactment. Tourists clapping politely. Maybe some exaggerated accents. Instead, what you see stuns you. The circle is perfect. Not in sand, but chalk. Not by firelight, but under colored lanterns. And yet, it feels the same. There's a Tulafels descendant reciting the rules. Two modern chiefs, decked out in hybrid garb, jeans under woven cloaks, walk in slow ceremonial steps. And yes, coconuts. Real ones. Balanced. Polished. Proud. The first throw lands gently near a circle painted to represent a historical boundary. The second, a high lob that lands right at the edge of a painted turtle rock. It's theater, sure. But it's also memory work. The children watch, eyes wide. Some mimic the movements with pebbles. The older folks lean in, not correcting, not criticizing, just remembering. And then someone in the crowd shouts, "Miss like your grandpa used to, eh?" Laughter erupts. You smile. So does the chief. That's when you realize, this isn't just nostalgia. It's revival. Historians today might label this as cultural pageantry, or categorize it under folkloric adaptation. But those terms miss the point. Because after the official demonstration ends, a few families stay behind, quietly. And in the soft hush of the receding crowd, two elders step into the circle. Not with fanfare. Not for show. They toss. Once each. Then bow. And everyone watching knows. That wasn't for tourists. That was real. Soon after, informal matches begin popping up. Not often. Not official. But steady. Two cousins argue over canoe rotation duties. Coconut toss. Two vendors both want the same stall spot during festival. Toss. A schoolyard fight over who gets the last banana. A very tiny toss. You help organize the next gathering. Help paint the circle. Carry coconuts. It's not the same, no. But then again, it was never meant to be preserved in glass. It was meant to live. To evolve. Now, the coconut court has a new rhythm, less rigid, more forgiving. Less feared, more festive. And yet, it still whispers the same lesson to those who stand within its arc. Speak with your hands. Aim with your heart. Throw only what you're willing to have returned. You've been here long enough now that they stop calling you visitor. You've helped tie mats, hauled coconuts, even been gently laughed at when your toss veered into a mango tree. It was windy. That's your story and you're sticking to it. But tonight, things take a surreal turn. You're invited to the far end of the archipelago, to an island few speak of aloud. No scheduled boats. No maps. Just stories. Whispers, really. Something about a vanished village, a ritual too wild to keep alive, and coconuts that glowed. You assume they mean spiritually. You are wrong. The journey there is quiet. A single canoe. You, the Tulafels' great-grandson, and a lantern that smells faintly of burnt sugar. He says little. Just rows, hums, and every now and then glances at the stars like they're trying to warn him of something but haven't decided what. When you arrive, the island is barely more than a ring of sand and tangled forest. Overgrown. Forgotten. And yet, the coconut circle is there. Still. Faded, but visible. A shallow depression surrounded by scorched posts, burned but not broken. You step into it and feel your skin prickle. Don't speak until the flame is lit, your guide says. He produces two coconuts, both wrapped in dry vines soaked in some pungent oil, and sets them gently on a raised stone. Then, using a flint, he strikes. Woomph! The coconuts catch fire. Real fire. Flames licking the husk, glowing in the dark like molten fruit. This is the flaming toss. A ritual too volatile for most islands. Used only in the gravest disputes, crimes of betrayal, accusations that threaten to shatter clans. The theory was simple: toss a flaming coconut into the center. If it burns clean, your truth is heard. If it sputters, hisses, or cracks, your lie is exposed. Legend says the gods themselves used to judge here, your guide murmurs. And sometimes, they still do. He tosses first. The coconut arcs high, flames roaring, and lands in the center with a crackling hiss. Steady burn. No flicker. No sputter. Now it's your turn. You didn't come to settle a dispute, but you do carry a question. One you've held since your first night watching coconut justice unfold. What happens when tradition burns too brightly to carry forward? You lift your coconut. It's heavier than it looks. The fire singes your fingers as you wind up and throw. It arcs. It spins. And it lands just beyond the circle. The fire sputters. The crowd, well, there is no crowd. Just wind. And silence. But your guide smiles. Some truths, he says, refuse to land where we expect. Historians don't know about this place. Not officially. No photographs. No footnotes. Just whispered fragments from sailors and one baffled botanist who reported strangely scorched coconuts among unusually symmetrical drift patterns. You don't write about it either. Some things are meant to stay half-remembered. But every now and then, when the village holds another coconut court and someone complains about the rules, you see the Tulafale's great-grandson glance to the sea and smirk. As if to say, there are places where coconuts burn. Be grateful they only fly here. You've grown used to the rhythm now, the steps before the toss, the slow sweep of arms, the language of arcs. But there's another ritual playing out in the background you've only recently started to notice. The arguing scholars. Every few months, they arrive in pairs or packs, anthropologists with sun hats and fragile notebooks, language theorists quoting 17th century sailors, even a tattooed grad student who insists the entire tradition is a metaphor for lunar cycles and masculine emotional repression. You quietly hope he never tries to throw a coconut. They bicker over everything. Was the coconut court really law? Was it sacred theater? A rebranded combat sport? A community stress valve cleverly disguised as ritualized fruit tossing? They map toss trajectories. Debate coconut density. Record every chant, every sigh. One team spends 4 days arguing whether the placement of a mat corner implies political deference or just sloppy weaving. The villagers watch them like they would a wrestling pig. With affection. With curiosity. With mild amusement. The Tulafale, now graying but still firm-voiced, humors them. Answers questions when he wants. Refuses to answer when he doesn't. One afternoon, after being asked whether the coconut's trajectory reflected intentional jurisprudence, he simply says, "Sometimes we threw to win. Sometimes we threw to be heard. Sometimes, we threw just to throw." The scholars write that down furiously. But here's the beautiful thing, their debates don't bother the villagers. Because for them, the coconut court was never about being pinned to a single definition. It was, and still is, a living system. It breathes. It rolls. It evolves. You witness a session later that week where two aunties argue over a shared bread oven. One tosses the coconut underhand with a wink. The other bats it away with her broom, and the whole court collapses into laughter. The Tulafale rules that the oven will be used on alternate days. No coconut required. But they toss anyway. The scholars don't know what to do with that. Some roll their eyes. Some write lengthy footnotes. A few just close their notebooks and smile. You learn that these debates have existed for decades, even centuries. Early European missionaries wrote about coconut tossing with thinly veiled condescension. Colonial governors tried to ban it. Academics romanticized it, then deromanticized it, then romanticized the deconstruction of their own romanticization. And through all of it, the coconuts kept flying. You reflect on this as you walk the beach one evening, barefoot in the cool sand. There's a coconut wedged between two driftwood branches. You pick it up. It's scuffed, sun-dried, maybe tossed last week or a decade ago. You draw a circle in the sand. Just a small one. You step back. And you throw. It doesn't matter if it hits the mark. It doesn't matter if anyone sees. What matters is that it moves. That it leaves your hand with purpose. Historians will keep arguing. But you? You understand now. The truth of the coconut court isn't in the documentation. It's in the doing. The wind tonight is soft, like breath against your cheek. No drums. No lanterns. Just the hush of the sea, and the faint squeak of palms brushing each other like old friends sharing a secret. You're the last to arrive at the circle, not late, just after. There's no crowd, no chiefs, no Tulafale. Just the mat. And one coconut. You step forward slowly. This isn't ceremony. Not officially. There's no dispute to settle, no crowd to interpret the arc of your throw. But somehow, this might be the most sacred toss of all. Because tonight, the dispute isn't with another. It's with yourself. You've been holding it quietly, questions about where you belong, what you carry, what you'll leave behind when you go. You've watched coconuts fly in fury, in humor, in reverence. You've seen them resolve grief and inheritance, flirtation and vengeance. But this toss? This one's personal. You lift the coconut. It's heavier than you expect. You think about the elders who welcomed you without knowing your name. The children who traced arcs in the sand. The Tulafil who never spoke too much, but always enough. You think about that flaming island. About Lonnie's smirk. About every shell tossed behind every bowed back. You take a step back. Breathe in. And you throw. It spins. It hums. And it lands, not on a post, not on a mat, but gently in the sand, half buried and still. No reaction. No verdict. Just peace. You sit down beside it, cross-legged, and watch the tide begin to reach for it. Not to claim it, just to acknowledge. Historians will still write. Tourists will still visit. The coconut court may rise and sleep and rise again, like breath through generations. But you? You've lived it. You've sat in its hush, laughed in its theater, and now thrown your own coconut into its long, spinning story. You lie back on the mat, arms folded behind your head, and stare up at the stars. They seem closer now. Just before your eyes close, you whisper a question you don't expect an answer to. Did I am right? A breeze picks up. The coconut rolls an inch closer. You smile. Yeah, you did. And so, with the stars quietly blinking above you and the tide whispering soft syllables against the sand, you close your eyes and let the echoes of Coconut Court fade gently into the folds of sleep. The flick of wrists, the arc of husks, the warm laughter after a near miss, they all drift now into memory, not gone, just resting. You picture the mat, rolled tight for another night. The Tulafil's sandals outside his door. The sacred shell resting in its basket of silence. The circle is empty, but never forgotten. It waits patiently, like tradition does, unfolding only when the moment calls, when someone needs to be heard without shouting. You feel your breath soften. The earth beneath you is warm and solid, the way only a story-soaked place can be. You remember how it felt to stand in the circle, not to win, but to understand. And that every coconut, wild, flaming, or lovingly off-target, was never really thrown at someone. It was offered. A message. A memory. A gentle reminder that even in disagreement, there can be rhythm. There can be grace. There can be the possibility of return. Let that stay with you tonight. Let the circle spin slowly in your dreams. Let the next throw come only when you're ready. And until then, rest. Sweet dreams.